Hi, I'm Peter Sidwell and today's recipe is a beautiful spinach, halloumi, feta and pine nut pie, all wrapped up in golden puff pastry. It is delicious. First thing you need to do is get yourself a pan like this. This is a cast aluminium pan from MasterClass. It works just the same as those big old heavy cast iron ones, but it's just so light. It's brilliant and it goes straight in the oven. Works on induction. Put that onto the heat. A little splash of olive oil and a sprinkle of salt. Then get your spinach. Now, it might seem like a lot of spinach, but once you've cooked it and wilted it down, it'll go to about a quarter of its volume, so there's so much water in there. Put the lid on and that'll get it hot quick, okay? Cook it for about 3 or 4 minutes and it'll go from this much and it'll wilt right down to a quarter of its volume. Once it's done that, lift it out, either run it under cold water or put it into a colander and run cold water over it. I actually like to really squeeze it with my hands and then squeeze it again and then squeeze it again. I promise you, there's so much water in spinach, but it's so important to get it out because if you don't, you end up with a soggy bottom and nobody wants a soggy bottom. Now the spinach is cooked, we want to turn our attention to the cheese. So grate your halloumi cheese straight onto the board. Then take your feta and just crumble it up into little pieces. You don't need to chop it, it'll just crumble really nicely. The zest of a lemon on top of that just gives a nice fragrance and works really well and is incredibly Greek in its sort of authenticity. Add that to the spinach and really start to mix it through. Also add in some toasted pine nuts. Now, the way to toast pine nuts is pour them into a non-stick frying pan. Again, I'm using my MasterClass cast aluminium pan, works on induction, really non-stick, brilliant. Put it on the heat, put your pine nuts in there and a tiny bit of oil, but watch them like a hawk, okay? Because pine nuts will burn like that, okay? Be really careful, stay with the pan and just toss them, stir them with a spoon if you need to, and just get them all nice and golden. Then switch the heat off and take them straight out of the pan because the pan will hold residual heat. And if you just turn it off and leave it to one side, they may well burn because the pan's still hot. Take your pine nuts, sprinkle them in, and then just give it a really good mix together with your hands, I think is best. Season it with a bit of black pepper. Don't need to put salt in there because the halloumi is salty and the feta is slightly salty. Now that you've got your mix, just leave it to one side and we'll turn our attention to the pastry. So I'm using ready roll puff pastry because it is just so much easier. That's what was in the shops, but you could buy the roll out stuff and you need to roll it into a rectangle, okay? So unroll it and then take your spinach mix and just place it in a long sort of sausage shape along the length of the pastry. Top it with a few more pine nuts if you've got them and then brush the edges with beaten egg. Roll the spinach over so that the pastry kind of encases it and makes one big giant sausage roll. Crimp all the edges to make sure that none of the filling escapes, okay? You can do that with a fork if you want, or a little pasta wheel, but just make sure you've got that added bit of pressure to keep everything inside. Transfer your pastry pie onto a baking tray. I'm using Crusty Bake. They've got these little perforated holes in there, so all the air can get through and the moisture can get out, and you end up with a super crispy pastry. Take the remaining beaten egg and brush the top really well, because we want this pie to be beautiful and golden. And then sprinkle it with the seeds. I'm using mustard seeds, coriander seeds and cumin. I like them because they've all worked together really well and you just get this sort of texture and this bite of aroma when you crunch into the seeds. Bake the pie in a preheated oven, 170 degrees, about 25 to 30 minutes, just until it's really golden and crisp. Because I'm using the Crusty Bake tray, I know underneath it's going to get really nice and crisp all the way through. If you want this recipe, go to kitchencraft.co.uk and you will find it there.